I don't want no oil, a spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMar, and you have been lucky enough to tune into For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. We talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, your family's happiness. And we talk about things that a lot of other news programs and a lot of other stations will not talk about or don't talk about. And one of those best examples, we, as you may recall, started talking about that terrible House Bill 6 way back when we first started this program in January of 2019. I believe early February was the first show where we mentioned House Bill 6. It, of course, came back in the news recently when there was that $60 million bribery scandal that cost Larry Householder the Speaker of the House position. But it has been knocked out of the news, even though there was a tremendous development this past week. So we're going to start out with our HB6 update. Usually that comes in the second half of the show, but there'll be an HB6 update. Then we have, in this show, we have a very unusual interview. It's a pre-recorded interview, and it's something you don't hear on the radio. This is a first for our show, and it may well be a first for the station, but we have an interview with a deaf environmentalist on the radio. And how do you interview a deaf person on the radio? Well, you'll find out. We're going to have that at about quarter after. Then we're going to hear from our sponsors, our wonderful, wonderful sponsors. A few announcements to make, and then we'll have our Eco News and Views. Rebecca will be joining us. She's already up and all ready to call in. And I hope you can call in too at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. This is the best show in Ohio, but it gets better every time you call in. And you don't have to call on the topic that we're talking about. You can call on any eco or environmental issue that's been concerning you or you've been wondering about. And we'd be happy to talk about it. So please give us a call at 866-240-1065. So now to the promised House Bill 6 update. As you'll recall, we had an interview last week with Representative Leland, who was telling us about the situation where they were having hearings on House Bill 6, unnecessary hearings, because the bill to repeal House Bill 6 was already written and has 58 co-sponsors, so as soon as it got to the floor, House Bill 6 would get repealed, and we would avoid getting First Energy's charges, or Energy Harbor's charges on our electric bill, in order to prop up their unnecessary, polluting, and expensive nuclear plants and coal plants down in the southern part of the country and in Indiana. Well, at the time, it sure looked like the hearings, the sole purpose of the hearings was to delay action on the bill until it was too late. And they had a deadline of October 1st, this past week. And so what they did is they held these hearings. They only heard testimony from people who supported the bill. And then on Wednesday, the committee ceased meeting. The committee broke up because Wednesday was the deadline. No decision was done by the deadline. No recommendations made, no reports. So it was very clear that literally the only reason they were holding the hearings was to run out the clock, and because as soon as the clock ran out, they disbanded the committee. So that's the bad news. So we have the Senate, the head of the Senate, Ohio Senate's already committed to repealing House Bill 6. The 58 co-sponsors in the House have committed to repealing House Bill 6, but the Republican Party leadership, Robert Cupp, Governor DeWine, and others have decreed that First Energy, Energy Harbor, will get their money. They paid out all those bribes. They're supposed to get something back in return for that, and so that's what's going to happen. Now they may still come back. They may still bring it to the floor and actually someday repeal it, maybe after the election, maybe before, although the odds every day that they delay more, the odds of that happening get slimmer. But at this point, because they missed that deadline, the process is going to begin. We will be starting to get charged on our bills starting January 1st. So something to look forward to, a nice gift from the Republican leadership. And to be fair, there are Republicans who are opposing HB 6. There's Republicans who've signed on to the repeal bills. And the head of the Senate, who has committed to full repeal, is a Republican. So this is not a pure Republican evil kind of a thing, but it is pure corruption, and it's an embarrassment for Ohio. We should not be participating in something like that. So when the deadline came and passed, we ended up, some of us, I'm no longer political director of the Ohio Green Party, but I am co-chair of the Wood County Green Party. So the Wood County Green Party, we had a nice little protest there in Bowling Green. We got out our signs and we got our bullhorns, and we went at the four corners holding up signs, saying things like repeal HB 6 now and crooks should not legislate. That was I think that was my favorite sign. And hundreds of people saw us, or thousands of people saw us, because that's the busiest intersection in Wood County. And there were hundreds of people were honking. The Republican Party campaign headquarters are literally right there at the intersection of Main and Wooster, just 2 doors down. So they heard us out there, and Teresa Gavarone, actually, my own personal state senator, one of the people who was personally responsible for pushing House Bill 6 through, she actually drove through that intersection and heard our bullhorns, and it was, sometimes a protest like that sometimes it's necessary, because what it did was it brought to the attention of thousands of people that were driving by, it brought to the attention what's going on. And it's so easy for important, vital, essential things like House Bill 6 to get knocked out of the news and for people to stop paying attention to them. But they have long-term consequences. And so we've got to keep focus on the important things and not let ourselves get all distracted. But so that's the House Bill 6 update. And if you're interested, there'll be pictures of the protest there on the YouTube version of the show. As you know, we record the show, and then we also put it back as a podcast and as a YouTube video. So it was good. There were over 20 people, which is not bad for calling for a protest on Monday and having it on Thursday. Over 20 people, lots and lots of support from passersby. Everybody who was walking by on Main Street would stop and ask, and when we tell them why we were there and what was going on, they were just outraged. So don't give up. That's the important thing here is that the repeal legislation is there on the books. There's a whole bunch of people waiting to just chomping at the bit to replace it. So if we could keep the pressure on, if we could make it hot enough for the Republican leadership in this election cycle, in this election year, we may still prevail. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. And now, speaking of perseverance and continuing to push things, and I happen to know a young man. His name is Jj Beckhold, and he has a lovely wife, Beatrice. And JJ happens to be deaf. He's a graduate of Gallaudet University, and he has always loved the outdoors. And in fact, he was a classmate of my son, and they both have a degree in outdoor education from Gallaudet University, which Gallaudet University is the deaf university, pretty much the premier deaf university for the world. Deaf students from all over the world come there because all the instructions in sign language, and it's kind of the focus of deaf culture. And so Tony and JJ, they've been friends a long time, and JJ has started this website. It's called Eutierria, and we're going to let him tell you about it. And Eutierria is all about ecology and the environment, and he covers a lot of the same topics that we do, actually, on this show, which is great. But you might wonder how we're going to have an interview with a deaf person on the radio. One thing a lot of people don't know about, people who aren't in deaf culture, don't have deaf family members, is that there's a really wonderful resource called Video Relay. And Video Relay works by, you are given a phone number, and you can call that, and you will be talking to a sign language interpreter, and the interpreter then connects to the deaf person you want to talk to, and they're on a video call. So what you're about to hear in this interview, JJ is a young man in his early 30s. You're going to hear a woman's voice. That's the voice of the interpreter. And it works great. You can literally just call any deaf person and have a conversation with them anytime, just the way you would with a hearing person. There's a little bit of a delay because, you talk, then the interpreter has to sign and then get the response and talk back. And so I've edited out most of those delays. I left the first one in just so you can get a sense of what it's like to use the relay. But if there's a deaf person in your life that that you know of, maybe a cousin or something like that you've always thought, I wish I could just give him or her a call, you can, by using this relay service. So here we go. Without further ado, there's our interview with Jj Beckhold. Okay, let's start with your name and the name of your website.
Absolutely. Hello. Yes, my name is JJ. Last name is Beckhold. And my website is called Eutierria.org, enrich.org.
And
I'm so sorry. Let me go ahead. It's Eutierria. We have some technical issues, so it's Eutierria.org.
Okay. And why did you pick that name?
Absolutely. I picked that name because it has special meaning to me and my wife. Eutierria is like a joint project that we're developing, and so it's a strong connection with the earth and a strong connection with what we are finding with the words and the description. The guy, and his name is Dr. Glenn Albright. He continued the ability teacher from Australia, and he created the word, and he brought awareness to people and their feelings in regards to their location and where they're at. So biophilia means love of nature, and so he created another word, the Eutierria, and that word is from the Greek, which means EU, which is good, and tierra, which is earth. And the IA at the end is belongs to. So the word basically is a feeling of belonging to the earth. which we feel that word is a perfect representation of how we feel. And as deaf people belonging to the earth means we feel that we have a shared common experience with other people.
Uh-huh. So what do you hope to do through your website?
So my goal is to get all of the environment-related information and become accessible for the deaf and the signing community. We're hoping to encourage sensitivity in relation to the earth and a feeling of stewardship. So our goal is to provide the environmental education, and continued stability and health and well-being information in regards to the experiences that we provide in the sign language and the accessibility. So all of us, not everything is accessible online or in person. So we want to make that accessible to the community. So, for example, if there's a video made by a nonprofit organization, they don't tend to caption that. And so radio, like podcasts, there's no script for that. So radio shows only speak, and there's so much information being passed verbally, but it's not accessible. So we want that information accessible. And so we'd like more information and more resources available.
Now, JJ, I know you've done a lot of things in the great outdoors. What were a few of your favorite outdoor experiences?
Good question. Yeah, I've got two experiences I'd like to share. My wife and I went on a road trip from Ohio to Las Vegas in Nevada. Big deaf event there. So we drove there with the goal to kind of just experience natural things along the way. So there's like a backpacking country that we went to, and then Zion and Bryce Canyon, and then also the Grand Canyon. And so we went ahead and we went and touched the river, and then we came all the way back up, and it was such a great experience, and everything that was there is so massive and big, and it was nice to see everything, and I'll never forget that. The second one is with my son, Donnie. We took a break, went to Southwest Florida at the Everglades, the natural forest there, and we went canoeing for like a whole week, and wow, it was such an amazing experience. We slept on wood planks. It was called Cheekies, and there was alligators all around that we could see, and we went to an island, and we went to hopping on different islands, and we camped on the beaches, and we just kind of watched for coyotes to come steal the food, and it was just such an amazing experience. We hiked or canoed over 10 miles, and it was such an amazing experience. So those two things have left quite an impact on me.
That's great. Now, but for a lot of deaf people, it's different. I'll never forget one time I took my son Tony and one of his deaf friends on a hike through some woods. Tony's friend was terrified because he'd never been in a wild area before, and he kept expecting murderers to attack us. Because in the movies he watched, every time people went into the woods, something terrible happened to them. Do you think that deaf people have a harder time getting nature experiences than hearing people?
The situation with your that's pretty funny, I have to admit. So I'm sure you can get your imagination running wild. But, of course, we expect that seeing movies and whatnot. But deaf people in general, no, I don't think they have a harder time. Deaf people, they only are affected by their hearing. But, they can connect information other ways. So my experience of going into the forest, taking a hike, going for a climb, camping, has not really been affected by their deafness. One of the biggest barriers that maybe we experience is accessibility to communication or information, meaning many of the natural forests or state parks provide natural educators or outdoor programs, and most of them, are all verbal. So the communication isn't there. with a reservation with a campsite, if you want to go camping or backcountry camping, that kind of thing. If there's some sort of an emergency or you have a question, you can't call the ranger. The ranger doesn't have any accessibility to a phone or anything that we can communicate on. So many of the parks and the contact information, they still use TTY, and that went way back to the 1990s. We don't use that anymore. We've got to get an update. So those are the biggest barriers for us, but as far as like getting out into nature, we do it just like anybody else.
Okay. You have very interesting stories on your website. In fact, I used a story that I first heard about through your website, the one about wind turbines painting one blade black, killing 75% fewer birds. How do you find your stories?
So I graduated from Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C., and that was an amazing international school. So that gave me a big international community of networks of friends and people all around the world. And many of them really do care about the environment, just like I do, being outside and sharing the information with each other and referring each other to environmental news and networks and getting information from them. And so I was directing all of those news, environmental type information, natural, geographic, whatnot, to follow kind of different information that we have on there. And it led me to other things as well. So I was trying to get on top of things in that regard. And so many of those great people with many great resources of information didn't know each other. And so I do travel often, and I meet and I find out, gosh, good information about that would benefit the community. And so try to interview and speak with as many people as I can, and then share it with other parts of the community. So my role would be to connect other people and connect each other with other people. And so part of that is, the connection and getting people in contact with each other and providing information and resources that we can share quickly and use as a society. And then that will hopefully help the environment quickly heal as well.
Oh, that's great. Now, I have to admit, my ASL has gotten pretty rusty. And right now, I'm only catching about half the signs on your videos, but I plan to keep watching and improve my receptive skills. Now, when I learned sign, again, back in the 1990s, there were a lot more initialized sign. For example, plastic used the letter P. I noticed that you don't use much initialized signing. When you sign plastic, you use the whole hand. Could you talk a little bit about ASL's shift away from initialized signing?
Absolutely. So just to be clear, ASL really is a language, and it's a spatial language. So when you're talking about initialized, we're thinking of signs specifically in English or pigeon signing English. So which one? Some of those are more English-based signs that actually use words, and then ASL is more on the other end, where it doesn't really connect so much with the English language and word-for-word order. It has its own language and visual, spatial, spatial, and I'm so sorry, spatial or tactile. That's why, deafblind people, they're using that. And so it's like more of a 3D language, and so you've got to use your space and direction and movement with that. So the parameters within the hands and the hand shape, using that's where we're trying to disconnect from the English language. And so I just want to clarify that people still definitely use the pigeon signing, use it all across America for sure. And it depends on the location, but sometimes English, they have accents in different cities, different countries, and signing as well has a different accent locally. And so One of the things is the deaf community is finally getting out of the dark ages, and especially in regards to being oral and those kind of things. Oh, awful history if you want to research that. But in the 80s and 90s, we finally decided, we have the right to the civil rights, and, with the ADA laws and whatnot, our language is finally being recognized. And so our language is finally has the freedom to grow and evolve in its own, just like English did in its own right. And so we want to decodalize that language and use our hands. So the 80s and the 90s has got, with the deaf community increasing there, and it's becoming more popular in schools and popular with hearing people. So hearing people are starting to teach and transition from oral and sign. We're trying to figure out, we don't want to be making up signs that we're teaching them, but we're creating signs as a result of different local needs, and very creative people. And so we want to take some of that back and take it back and really analyze the language and look at those parameters and hand shapes and what is visually, conceptually appropriate for that sign. And that's going to cause us to really get away from that visual English piece of it and have ASL be much more fluent. And so if you watch people sign, professional ASL, and you're watching like a movie, really it's very cool. And that's one big reason for that.
All right. Well, so if someone listening to the show has a deaf family member, what can they do to encourage them to explore nature?
First, include them in their nature experience. If, I'm assuming the hearing people get out into nature and go fishing and hiking and biking, include them in that and be able to, they'll be able to pick it up very quickly. And to start with, doing like back road, get out, identify leaves and trees and bugs and animals and identify those different things. And so go to even a local park and see, that they've got different animals there. And so with the local park staff or books, or you can get from the library, and then like Florida, all of the different environmental places that they could go. You've got some stability there with the flowers and the plants. And so encourage them to ask questions and be interested in that. And then share that information about the wildlife and the resources there with them. And they will grow in that environment.
And is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't covered?
Really, feel free to look at my website, add more videos and projects that I will do. I'll be able to do that, and then you can look at that. You can stop by and see all kinds of cool videos and projects. So I'm looking forward to connecting with more of you. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate it, too. Thank you, JJ. My interview with JJ. And, it's definitely kind of a pick-me-up, kind of an inspiration, because it just reminded me that everyone, it doesn't matter, blind people, deaf people, people of all races, all religions, everyone really at some level feels that connection to the earth, feels that connection to nature and that desire to have a healthy world, have a healthy planet. It's just that sometimes we get divorced from that by the circumstances of our lives and by things like politics and money, but fundamentally that's a human trait, I believe, and it's just kind of inspirational to see someone like JJ, a young man who's put his time and effort into creating really a beautiful website. The images on there are really nice. So that was Eutierria.org. Okay, now, speaking of inspirational things, it's time to hear from our sponsors. The For a Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset, every day of the year. And if you want to find out what's going on there, there's several ways you can contact them. One is to give them a call at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. You can check out their website, wcparks.org. They have a cool app at the App Store. Just search for WC Parks. And finally, you can also find them on Facebook, where they update a lot of their activities. We are also brought to you by our patrons, our wonderful patrons who've gone to patreon.com and searched for a Green Future. And there they see our attractive page where they can scroll down and choose different membership levels. And they've chosen to have a small monthly amount taken out of their checking account and sent over to us, for which we are very, very grateful. And so we would urge you to become a patron by going to patreon.com and searching for a Green Future. We also have a couple announcements. And again, this anytime any organization has an announcement about an environmental thing or a nature activity, just send an email to joe@joedamar4agreenfuture.org, and we will most likely read it on the air. 2 announcements today. One's just a reminder that the Wood County Scarecrow Contest is still on, and you would bring your scarecrows to the Wood County Museum at 13660 County Home Road on Tuesday, October 13th from 4 to 7:30 p.m. And there's judging, there's prizes, there's all kinds of fun. So just that would be Tuesday, October 13th. And then another announcement, an interesting thing, the Wood County Parks are hosting a Masked Hero Geo Chase, which is a self-guided geocaching adventure in the parks. And you're going to embark on a hero's adventure, tracking a villain's path and thwarting their diabolical plans to ruin nature. By using your smartphone, you chase the villain virtually and discover one coordinate clue leading to the next within a park, and eventually leading to your success, your reward, and saving the day. So you complete all 4 geo chases, and you get an even bigger reward. It's free. You don't have to sign up or anything. Just show up. And the chases will be October 5th through 11th at W.W. Knight Nature Preserve, October 12th through 18th at the Bradner Preserve, October 19th through 25th at the Cedar Creek Preserve, and the 4th and final one is October 26th to the 31st at Sawyer Quarry Nature Preserve. All right, so some interesting times, interesting things going on at the Wood County Parks. Rebecca, are you with us?
I am.
Okay, great. What did you think of JJ there?
That was really interesting. When I was in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago for the Kavanaugh hearings, we were staying in a neighborhood that's fairly close to Gallaudet, apparently.
Oh, were you part of those hearings, Rebecca?
Well, they would only let you be in there. I was not testifying or anything, but we were all cycling through, and, some people were screaming and yelling and getting arrested. And
Oh, okay. That's why you're there. Okay, got it. Yeah, oh, so you actually stayed at Gallaudet?
Well, not at Gallaudet. It was a neighborhood around there that's kind of an up-and-coming neighborhood. It was kind of cool, though, because there was an absolutely free trolley there that you could take downtown into the Capitol.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that neighborhood around Gallaudet, when my son went there, it wasn't up-and-coming. It was sort of down and bottoming at that time, but...
Yeah, it's kind of a mixture of the two now.
Yeah, now it's really started to sort of gentrify because it has that base in the middle, and Gallaudet University is intricately linked to the history of Washington, D.C. A lot of people don't know this, but,
Wow.
For example, the gym there at Gallaudet used to be the official gym for the U.S. Senate. So all the senators would that's where they would go to work out, and, they'd see the deaf people, and it was created by Congress, Gallaudet University. It's a rich history there, and they have a nice museum on the campus. If you ever happen to go there, take a swing by Gallaudet. It's interesting. All right.
There's a lot of museums in D.C.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. But yeah, just really like his website, and I admire what he's doing. So I was glad I was able to get him on For a Green Future.
For sure.
All right. Well, we've come to the announcement or the Eco News segment of our show, and I wanted to start out with a story about what's happening to our neighbors to the north up in Michigan. You know, this show broadcasts from Toledo on 106.5 FM, The Ticket, and the signal goes way up into Michigan, almost all the way to Detroit. And they have on the ballot there something called Proposal 1. And I really wanted to talk a little bit about this because it's sort of an illustration of just how tricky and nasty these corporations are, because there's a law in Michigan, it's actually enshrined in their constitution, that when there's extraction industries, like the oil and gas industry, for example, there's fees put on those industries, and those fees from the extraction industry have to be used to purchase land for conservation. So when they decided to open Michigan up for things like oil and gas drilling, they said, that's going to run out. It's a finite resource, and so when it's done, we don't want to just be left Michigan as a wasteland. And so that's one reason Michigan has so many huge, beautiful parks, and that's why, that's part of the purity of Michigan, and that pure Michigan sense is because they've had this money that's come in, and they've used it to buy parkland. Now, the law, the constitutional amendment that created this fund, says that up to 25% of the money that gets brought in can be used for buildings and facilities, and the rest has to be used to acquire land for conservation. And so what the corporations want to do, and the original impetus from this, as I understand it, comes from a lot of corporations in Michigan, and then they convinced a lot of conservation groups to sign on. Not all of them, though. Sierra Club is a notable exception, and a lot of conservation groups are opposing Proposal 1, but they want to change 2 words. And this is why I wanted to talk about this. This is illustrative of how nasty and tricky these people are, because what they want to change those 2 words to is they want to change it to that you have to spend up to 25, or you can spend up to 25% on buildings and facilities to not.
So that would mean
no.
The lower range would be 0.
That's right. Right. You don't have to spend
Okay.
any. If you don't want to build a building or make a parking lot this in 1 year, in a year, you don't have to. But
Okay.
But they want to change that to say not less than 25% on buildings and facilities. And so, in other words, they not only do they get rid of the cap, because now that all you have to do is not less than 25, now you can spend 75 on buildings and facilities if you want, which means you can take all those wonderful parks full of nature, and you can basically turn them into condos or whatever. You could put as many buildings and facilities of any type that you want on this parkland, which is what a lot of anti-environmental organizations have been trying to push for all over the country. They want to build strip malls inside parklands. They want to build huge hotel complexes inside parklands. And if this Proposal 1 goes through in Michigan, they'll be able to use the fees that have been set aside in the Constitution for purchasing land and preserving land. They can actually use that money now to bulldoze the land and build construction on the land. And in fact, they'll be mandated to spend at least 25% of everything that comes in every year, paving and building, and so that's an example. Some corporate lawyer that probably working for ALEC. This is a guess. That conservative pro-business, anti-environment organization, ALEC. This is probably the culmination of their career, if you know what I mean. Go to law school, get a big cushy job with a big company, and spend your life trying to figure out how could we change all that nature into more strip malls and things, and they figured out, with just 2 words we could do it. And there's a good example of this in Ohio, and Ohio, as you know, we have a monopoly for our electric utilities. Basically, the decision was made, we don't want a lot of different electric utilities all competing against each other, everybody putting up separate power lines, redoing infrastructure, having multiple companies. So they give electric companies a monopoly. But when they put that law into effect, they said, but since there's no competition, those companies can't have, quote, excessive profits, unquote. And 2 years ago, I believe it was, there was a 1-word change made to that law by, again, the guys in the suits who spend their lives trying to figure out how to do these things. They added the word significantly to that phrase.
Okay.
So now you can have excessive profits, but you can't have significantly excessive profits. And of course,
what does that even mean?
Well, that word was never defined. Significantly was never defined. And significantly is in the eye of the beholder, basically.
Pretty much.
So, for example, if you're the CEO of First Energy, you might think 120% profit is not significant. It's like, why? That's not significant. And in fact, there's been no, there was sort of a rough rule that had kind of gotten put into place through years of whatevering by the Public Utilities Commission. They had kind of semi-settled on 17% back when the phrase was just excessive profits. They've decided anything above 17% was kind of excessive, and if they made more than that, they actually had to give everybody a little bit of a refund on their electric bill, so you'd get like a couple bucks back. But now that they've added the word significantly, that 17% no longer applies, because that's excessive profit. But is it significantly excessive? No. And so there's this army of guys in suits, army of lawyers that are constantly looking for these tricky things in order to hurt the environment more and hurt the consumers more. And I just want to say, I want to go on record personally as suggesting to our Michigan listeners that you vote no on Proposal 1. All right. So, wow, we're really racing along. It's 1:45 already, Rebecca.
Wow.
Okay. All right. Well, so quickly, big story came out from Inside Climate News. They had a story on September 28th, and that is about ocean stratification. And what that means is that the top 600 feet of the ocean are now warming up so much that they're forming a sort of a solid layer with a boundary. And when that happens, that blocks the flow of nutrients into and out of the surface of the ocean. We did a whole show on this back last August, you might remember. It's upwelling and downwelling. That was our August 11th, 2019 show. So if you want
I'm
more,
familiar.
Yeah, if you want more, if you want to be reminded, you can go back and check that podcast out. But what this does, if this sets up fully, and it looks like it's heading that way, this will block the upwelling, because the nutrients that come from under the ocean that have flowed literally from one end of the earth to the other, picking up nutrients as it came along, that water has to hit a continent or an island and then bubble up to the surface. And where it does, that's when all the plankton go, hey, nutrients, and they blossom, and the phytoplankton eat the plankton, or the plankton eat the phytoplankton, and then the little fish eat the phytoplankton, and the big fish eat the little fish, and that's where we get our food. Well, if this sets up, the researchers who did this study are saying, forget about this whole 2 degrees Fahrenheit increase in global warming by 2100. They're saying it's going to be 8 degrees global warming by 2100, and triple the
Holy
amount of
guacamole.
and triple the amount of CO2, because the phytoplankton in the ocean are one of the biggest ways carbon gets pulled out of the atmosphere. In fact, 25% of all this carbon we dump into the globe every year gets absorbed by the phytoplankton. If the phytoplankton don't have anything to eat, if they don't have any nutrients, they can't grow and they won't absorb the carbon. And so the rate of carbon increase is just going to shoot through the roof. That's that positive feedback loop, that thing that we've been talking about for ever since we started the show. We've been trying to tell people, hey, we're caught in a positive feedback loop. So this little study, and it was originally published in Nature Climate Change, could directly affect all of us in terms of not having enough.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Phytoplankton.
Yeah.
I keep looking up the Arctic for various things, and it says it has phytoplankton and zooplankton.
Right.
So is phytoplankton basically plankton which is kind of plant-like in nature?
Yeah, it is plants.
Because I thought zooplankton sounds like animals, like zoology. So, okay, I'm glad I'm right about that.
Right. They're single-celled plants. And
right.
Some of them are diatoms, which are cool little dinosaur-looking single-celled organisms, and others are algae of various kinds. And then, that, as you say, the zooplankton eat them, and then the fish eat the zooplankton. But the amount of biomass on the Earth that are these phytoplankton and zooplankton, there's as much of them just in terms of biomass. So there's more of them actually in terms of biomass than there is everything else. All the people and the trees and the animals and the plants. If you could put us all together and put us on a scale, we don't weigh as much. There's not as much of us as there is phytoplankton and zooplankton. So they're actually more important to the global ecosystems than we are. We could disappear tomorrow and everything would continue along, but if all the phytoplankton was gone, the Earth would come crashing. The whole life cycle would come crashing to a halt, and it is severely threatened by this, because without that upwelling and without and downwelling, phytoplankton literally cannot survive. So that's kind of a downer, but I wanted to kind of counter that. Part of the way we're going to stop putting carbon in the air is by improving our battery storage, so that we don't have to burn any coal or natural gas or oil to get energy anymore. And there's a technology that everybody should be familiar with, because it's the latest up and coming technology. Right now most of our batteries, even the utility scale batteries, are the ones that use lithium ion. There's another sort of battery. It's called a flow battery, and flow batteries use liquid, and in the liquid there's suspended materials that can hold electrons and discharge electrons. And a lot of the flow batteries that we now have use something called vanadium, an element called vanadium. But you can also use something like iron. So you could just dissolve some iron in water, and what you have is some of the iron is positive in terms of ions, and some is negative, and there's a membrane between the two halves. And so by exchanging electrons between the positively charged particles and the negatively charged particles, you can draw power out of the battery, or you can put power into the battery. And the cool thing about flow batteries is you can make them as big as you need to make them. Though, in fact, they don't start working well until you get up into the 20 kilowatt range. But you could make a flow battery with Olympic-sized swimming pools full of the electrolyte, full of the liquids. And they're two separate liquids. You have to keep them separated with that membrane in between. But so you can make batteries that store and put out as much power as a nuclear power plant by having big chambers. And the research is racing along, and it's looking like these things are going to start becoming practical very soon. There's already demonstration models, but this could be one of the main ways that we manage to shut down carbon for our energy production altogether is by using flow batteries in conjunction with wind and solar, and so you can always save the power when you don't need it and then use it when you need it. And flow batteries have some amazing properties about them. One is that they never wear out. There's no limit to the number of charges and discharges you can do, the way there is with lithium-ion and other batteries, which after 10,000 discharges, a lithium-ion battery is pretty much done. You've got to recycle it or scrap it. But flow batteries, you could charge and discharge completely and recharge completely, and you can do it literally an infinite number of times without depleting the battery itself, without damaging the battery. And, like I say, they're looking at using iron, which is a non-toxic. And so, take that, Michael Moore. Michael Moore, remember back with his movie Planet of the Humans, was saying it's hopeless. There's no way we could save our society. We've all better just die. Well, no, we could if we apply technologies like flow batteries. If we apply them correctly and carefully, we don't have to have our society collapse. We could move to a sustainable, a green future, and that's what our show is all about, for a green future. So that's all I had, eco news update-wise. How about you, Rebecca? Have you got anything?
Yeah, now I happen to have a sister living in California, so I was looking up what was going in Santa Clara County, which is Bay Area, I think part of the Silicon Valley. It's actually been affected by the SCU Lightning Complex, third largest fire in California history. And I was looking up the local news, and it said that there's this one item: the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors is planning on dissolving the South Santa Clara Fire District and the Los Altos Hills Fire District. It's a lot of complicated language, but as nearly as I can tell, like these are sort of, they both encompass like 2 or 3 towns, and, it's just sort of a way that they can coordinate their firefight, because these towns cover a lot of non-town area, apparently, because they want to stop it before they get to their town. So they have this long history of cooperation and, having somebody with a phone there and somebody to say, okay, you do this, you do that. And that's going to be cut because they're out of money. In this measure, it says, these 2 towns' fire districts shall continue to try to coordinate and their efforts, but they shall do it without money. And these 2 towns shall continue to apply for grants. So, and the municipalities are very much against it. They've sent in statements saying that it's going to affect their ability to fight fires well, and Morgan Hill and Gilroy don't like it. So yeah, basically it's something to be forced into because they spent so much fighting this fire, and there's no reason to think that next year's fire season is going to be better.
Huh. Yeah.
They're just going to be fighting it with less resources.
Well, that's an important thing to remember, is that, our resources to fight these things are limited, and they, at the same time that our resources are running low, the fires are getting worse. They're getting bigger and more frequent. So it's
yeah. I mean, I wonder if this is probably playing out, across many counties in Southern California. And I'm guessing the federal government isn't going to step in and fill in the gap.
I would say your guess is pretty accurate there.
Yep.
All right. Well, but we know, Rebecca, that eventually we're going to figure all this out, and we're going to have a green future because...
Oh, my God. Did you get another letter from the future?
I did. My great-great-granddaughter, Marie I., writing from the year 2300, sent me a letter.
Thank heavens.
Here's a flash of photons next to my bed this morning, and here's the letter. Dear GGG, well, it's been a whirlwind of activity here. People and supplies have been pouring in from all over the world. As you know, those of us who have been working on the drilling project have been living in the old, ugly, Soviet-style concrete buildings that were already here when the project started. It was decided that refurbishing the old buildings would have the least environmental impact. Well, now that we're doubling in number of people, we're actually building modern structures. Unlike your time, we don't believe buildings are supposed to last forever. They're designed from the beginning to break down and return to the soil. Using lightweight cellulose foam, the new crew quarters are a 200-foot-high half cylinder. The foam is protected by a waterproof plastic made from corn oil, and as long as the coating is renewed every 5 years, the building could stand for a century. But when it's done, by slashing the coating open, decomposition starts immediately. The material is so light it doesn't need a huge foundation, just a few anchors. Inside, the rooms are huge compared to our cramped cement rooms. 15 floors allows for labs, dorms, recreation, health spas, even a running track. And it will take less energy to heat and cool than even one of the old concrete boxes we've been living in. Michael and some of the engineers are grumbling about us losing sight of the mission, but this is an incredibly exciting time. People don't actually gather in person like this very often in my time. Usually we use holographs to have meetings and do projects, but it's been decided that the stuff that we're studying will not be exported around the world until we learn more about it. I'm really looking forward to that. Love, Marie I.
Wow.
So, yeah, exciting things happening in the year 2300. All right, well, we're almost at the end of the show. We've got about a minute left. And I just want to remind people that if you want more information about the show, or if you have any kind of comments or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. We have you would write to Joe at joedemare4agreenfuture.org. That's JOEDEMAREFOR agreenfuture.org. Check us out on Facebook. Like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube page, and our podcast. And we've been doing pretty well in terms of the podcast. We're growing steadily. Our ranking last week in Podomatic News podcasts was 75 out of thousands. So thank you very much to those who are listening on the internet. Love doing the show. Thanks for listening. This is Joe DeMar.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we're signing off.
I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia.